If this message appears in your awareness exactly when you're feeling overwhelmed by life's demands, it's because your consciousness has reached a saturation point where ordinary coping strategies can no longer provide the relief you need. The crushing weight of responsibilities, the constant mental noise, the feeling that you're drowning in circumstances beyond your control. None of this is evidence that you're failing. It's your system calling for the quantum healing shift that transforms overwhelm from chaos into clarity through consciousness alignment. This quantum healing shift operates through what researchers call nervous system regulation. But what they don't understand is that true regulation doesn't happen through techniques or management strategies. It emerges when consciousness recognizes overwhelm as temporary turbulence in the vast space of aware presence that remains calm, regardless of external circumstances or internal mental activity. The synchronicity that brought you to this understanding means your awareness has evolved beyond trying to control overwhelming situations and toward recognizing the peaceful observer that witnesses all experience without being disturbed by any of it. Your nervous system has been preparing for this recognition through every moment of feeling stretched beyond capacity, developing the sensitivity needed to access the eye of the storm that exists within every overwhelming experience. Something in the healing intelligence of the universe recognized that you're ready for the shift that doesn't just provide temporary relief from overwhelm, but establishes unshakable inner stability as your baseline state, regardless of how chaotic external circumstances become. This isn't another stress management technique. This is recognition of the space within consciousness where overwhelm cannot actually penetrate. Right now, without trying to change anything about your current situation or mental state, can you sense the awareness that observes whatever overwhelm might be present? There's a part of you that remains completely peaceful even when thoughts are racing and emotions feel intense. This observer consciousness is the doorway into the quantum healing shift that transforms overwhelm into spacious presence. You've been receiving glimpses of this shift during moments when overwhelm suddenly dissolves without obvious cause, haven't you? Brief experiences of profound calm that emerge from nowhere, demonstrating that peace isn't something you need to create through effort, but something you can access through recognition of what's already present beneath mental turbulence. The reason this healing shift is emerging now isn't accidental. The intensity of overwhelm you've been experiencing has been calibrating your consciousness to appreciate the profound relief that becomes available when inner peace stabilizes as your natural state, rather than an occasional escape from mental chaos and external pressure. The overwhelm you're carrying feels like it's coming from every direction at once, doesn't it? Work demands that never seem to decrease, family responsibilities that multiply faster than you can address them, financial pressures that create constant background stress, and the general pace of modern life that feels designed to keep you perpetually behind schedule and emotionally depleted. Your mind has become like a computer with too many programs running simultaneously. Thoughts jumping between urgent tasks, mental tabs open for countless unfinished projects, and that constant underlying anxiety that you're forgetting something important or failing to meet expectations that feel impossible to satisfy consistently. Sleep has become complicated because your mind struggles to shut down when your head hits the pillow. Either racing thoughts keep you awake reviewing everything that happened during the day and planning for tomorrow's challenges, or you fall asleep exhausted only to wake feeling like your nervous system never fully rested during the night. The overwhelming sensation extends beyond just having too much to do. It's the feeling that you're fundamentally unable to keep up with the demands of your own life. Simple decisions become exhausting because your mental capacity feels stretched to its limit. Choices that should be straightforward require enormous effort because your internal resources feel completely depleted. You've probably noticed that overwhelm affects your body in ways that create additional stress. Tension headaches from mental strain, digestive issues during particularly intense periods, or physical fatigue that seems disproportionate to your actual activity level. The connection between mental overwhelm and physical symptoms creates cycles where worry about health adds to the mental burden you're already carrying. Social interactions have become more challenging when you're overwhelmed because you don't have the emotional bandwidth to engage authentically with others. You might find yourself going through the motions of conversations while your mind races with everything you need to accomplish, or feeling guilty for being mentally absent when people need your attention. Perhaps most frustrating is how temporary the relief feels when you do find moments of calm. Meditation might provide 20 minutes of peace. A weekend break could clear your head temporarily. But overwhelm seems to return with the same intensity as soon as you re-engage with your regular responsibilities. The worst part might be the self-criticism that accompanies overwhelm, feeling like you should be able to handle everything more efficiently, comparing yourself to others who seem to manage similar responsibilities with ease, or believing that overwhelm is evidence of personal inadequacy rather than a natural response to genuinely challenging circumstances. You might have developed strategies for managing overwhelm that require constant vigilance and energy to maintain. Detailed scheduling systems, productivity methods, or stress reduction techniques that become another layer of things you need to remember and execute properly when your capacity is already stretched thin. Every moment of feeling overwhelmed, every experience of mental chaos, every period when life's demands seem to exceed your capacity to handle them gracefully, has been preparing your consciousness for this recognition that overwhelm isn't evidence of personal failure. It's awareness temporarily forgetting its essentially spacious nature while developing the sensitivity needed to access unshakable inner stability. The frustration you felt with stress management techniques that provide temporary relief but don't prevent the next overwhelming episode tells a perfect story of preparation for lasting transformation. Breathing exercises that helped briefly were teaching you to distinguish between imposed calm and natural peace. Productivity systems that worked initially were demonstrating that external organization can't create internal spaciousness when consciousness identifies with mental activity. Think of how a tree remains rooted and stable during storms by staying connected to deep foundations that don't move with surface winds. Your journey through overwhelming experiences has been developing the understanding that authentic stability comes from recognizing the awareness that remains unchanged by mental weather rather than trying to control external circumstances. Every attempt to manage overwhelm through external optimization was preparing you to understand that lasting peace emerges when consciousness stops fighting against challenging situations and starts recognizing the spacious presence that contains all experience without being disturbed by any of it. The exhaustion from trying to control overwhelming circumstances was consciousness calling your attention to the effortless peace that becomes available through recognition rather than management. The timing of your overwhelming experiences corresponds perfectly with periods when your sensitivity was developing enough to eventually appreciate the profound relief available through the quantum healing shift. What seemed like escalating stress was actually consciousness building the contrast needed to recognize authentic spaciousness when it stabilizes as your natural state. Your nervous system has been like an instrument, gradually learning to distinguish between the noise of mental activity and the silence that contains all sound. The overwhelming thoughts, the emotional intensity, the feeling of being stretched beyond capacity. All of it was preparation for recognizing the vast space of awareness that remains peaceful regardless of mental content. The resistance you've felt toward accepting overwhelm as a permanent aspect of modern life has been your deeper wisdom, recognizing that mental chaos isn't your true nature, but temporary identification with thought activity that can be transcended through understanding rather than management. Even your concerns about whether sustainable peace is possible, given your actual responsibilities, have been consciousness ensuring that when inner stability does emerge, it will be based on genuine recognition rather than escapist fantasy that dissolves when real challenges require attention. Something profound is beginning to settle in your nervous system right now. Can you sense it? That subtle but unmistakable feeling of space opening around thoughts that previously felt urgent and overwhelming, of your entire internal environment beginning to organize around calm presence rather than reactive urgency, of mental activity starting to feel less dense and more transparent. Your brain's default mode network is literally reorganizing as this recognition deepens. Neural patterns that have been hyperactive in scanning for problems and maintaining constant vigilance are beginning to settle into coherent rhythms that support responsive awareness rather than reactive overwhelm. The executive function centers of your brain are recalibrating to operate from spacious clarity rather than pressured urgency. The electromagnetic field around your nervous system is shifting into patterns that support sustained calm rather than chronic activation. When your bioelectric field achieves coherence, it creates the optimal conditions for mental clarity, emotional stability, and the kind of effortless functioning that makes even challenging responsibilities feel manageable rather than overwhelming. Your autonomic nervous system is beginning to remember its capacity for operating from rest and restoration mode as the primary state, rather than the brief interludes between overwhelming activation that have characterized your recent experience. This parasympathetic dominance creates the internal environment where clarity emerges naturally rather than being forced through mental effort. Notice how your breathing is naturally becoming slower and more satisfying without conscious effort to control it. This is your respiratory system responding to the shift towards spacious awareness that allows overwhelm to be present without resistance while maintaining the peaceful observer that remains unaffected by mental turbulence. But here's what's building in your consciousness that will completely transform your relationship to overwhelming situations. The recognition that overwhelm isn't evidence of too much happening. It's consciousness temporarily forgetting its naturally spacious essence and now preparing to remember through the magnificent process of quantum healing shift. The reason this shift recognition is becoming available now is because your awareness has developed enough sensitivity through overwhelming experiences to appreciate the profound relief that emerges when inner spaciousness becomes your baseline state, rather than something you occasionally access between periods of mental chaos. The quantum healing shift doesn't just affect your individual stress levels. It creates coherence patterns that influence the nervous system state and emotional well-being of everyone in your environment. When you stabilize in authentic spaciousness, people around you naturally feel more calm and centered because coherent presence creates field effects that activate inner stability in others. Feel this settling presence building in your awareness as we explore the most profound secret of transforming overwhelm. The understanding that will reveal why some people maintain unshakable peace despite intense responsibilities, while others feel overwhelmed by relatively simple demands. 3 years ago, I was drowning in overwhelm despite having excellent systems for managing responsibilities and stress. Every productivity method, time management technique, and stress reduction strategy provided temporary relief. But the underlying pattern of feeling perpetually behind and emotionally depleted continued to dominate my daily experience with exhausting persistence. The cruel irony was that my efforts to control overwhelm were creating more overwhelm. Every system became another thing to maintain perfectly. Every technique became additional mental load when my capacity was already stretched thin. I was managing my management systems while trying to manage the life that the systems were supposed to make manageable. During intense periods of overwhelm, none of the strategies I had learned seemed accessible. The breathing techniques that worked during calm moments became impossible when my nervous system was fully activated. The mindfulness practices that made sense intellectually couldn't compete with the urgent mental chatter that seemed to bypass conscious awareness entirely. The breakthrough came during what felt like my most overwhelming week, when something in me simply gave up the effort to manage or control the chaotic situation. Instead of trying to make the overwhelm go away or organizing my way out of the intensity, I became curious about the awareness that was observing the mental chaos without being swept away by it. I realized that beneath all the mental noise and emotional intensity, there was a part of me that had never been overwhelmed. A spacious presence that observed racing thoughts with the same equanimity it observed peaceful thoughts. This observer consciousness wasn't affected by the content of mental activity any more than the sky is affected by the weather patterns that move through it. The quantum healing shift that followed was immediate and profound. Not because the overwhelming thoughts disappeared completely, but because my relationship to them transformed so dramatically that they lost their power to create suffering. I discovered that I could remain peacefully present while mental activity continued its patterns, like watching storms pass through an unchanging landscape. Within weeks of learning to rest in spacious awareness rather than identifying with mental content, my entire experience of responsibility and demand transformed. Situations that previously triggered overwhelming reactions became opportunities to practice returning to the peaceful observer. Tasks that used to feel impossible became manageable when approached from inner spaciousness rather than pressured urgency. But the most remarkable change was discovering that my presence had become calming to others. Family conversations became more peaceful, work meetings flowed more smoothly, and even strangers seemed to relax when interacting with me. The quantum healing shift had created a field of coherent calm that influenced everyone in my environment. The recognition that changed everything was understanding that I wasn't someone who had overwhelmed problems that needed to be solved. I was spacious awareness, temporarily believing that mental activity defined my experience. The shift happened when consciousness remembered its essential, spacious nature and stopped taking thought content so personally. Now I use every moment of mental intensity as an opportunity to return to spacious presence. Overwhelming thoughts still arise occasionally, but they pass through awareness like weather through sky, creating temporary experiences rather than defining my fundamental state of being. If you're exhausted from managing overwhelm and ready to discover the spacious presence that exists beneath all mental activity, if you've sensed that true peace comes from recognition rather than technique, if you've had glimpses of the observer consciousness that remains unaffected by thought content, then you're ready for the quantum healing shift that makes inner stability your natural state. Subscribe and keep walking this path of healing with us, not just to this channel, but to this recognition that you are not someone who has overwhelm. You are spacious awareness, temporarily believing in the reality of mental turbulence. Here's what psychology, stress management, and even mindfulness approaches don't want you to understand about the quantum healing shift. Every technique that promises to help you manage overwhelm better actually reinforces the fundamental misunderstanding that you are someone who has overwhelming experiences rather than spacious awareness, temporarily identifying with mental activity. This identification itself maintains the patterns that generate stress and emotional turbulence. The revolutionary recognition that makes the quantum healing shift effortless is this: overwhelm isn't something that happens to consciousness. Overwhelm is what consciousness experiences when it believes it is the mental activity rather than the spacious awareness in which all thoughts appear and disappear. Your nervous system creates overwhelming sensations based on this fundamental case of mistaken identity. When you recognize yourself as the spacious observer of all mental activity rather than the overwhelming thoughts themselves, your entire system receives different instructions about how to respond to challenging situations. Instead of preparing for threats that exist primarily in mental projections, your body begins operating from the coherent calm that emerges when consciousness knows its essential spacious nature. This obliterates every approach to overwhelm that maintains separation between the observer and the observed, between consciousness and mental content, between spacious awareness and overwhelming thoughts. Your racing thoughts aren't happening to a separate you. Your racing thoughts are consciousness temporarily exploring what it feels like to believe in mental chaos while never actually becoming disturbed by any thought content. The difference between stress management and quantum healing shift is this. Stress management tries to control or reduce overwhelming thoughts while maintaining the belief that you are someone who has problems with mental turbulence. Quantum healing shift recognizes that there is no separate you who has overwhelm. There is only spacious consciousness temporarily believing in the reality of mental projections that appear and disappear in awareness. When you understand this, you realize that overwhelming thoughts aren't evidence of mental dysfunction. They're consciousness exploring what it feels like to believe in separation from spaciousness while maintaining its unlimited capacity for peaceful presence. The shift happens when awareness stops taking overwhelming thoughts personally and starts recognizing them as temporary weather patterns in the vast sky of spacious consciousness. The access to permanent inner stability comes not through managing overwhelm better, but through recognizing that the one who would manage overwhelm is itself a mental construct. And what you actually are is the spacious awareness in which all mental activity appears and disappears without disturbing your essential peace. The quantum healing shift is already occurring in your consciousness right now, and the changes emerging in your awareness confirm that spacious presence has begun organizing itself as your primary experience rather than something you occasionally access between overwhelming episodes. Your relationship to mental activity is beginning to transform as thoughts naturally have more space around them. Racing thoughts still arise, but they don't immediately capture your complete attention the way they used to. There's often an awareness present that can observe overwhelming thinking without getting caught in the content or urgency of the thoughts. Daily responsibilities are starting to feel more manageable, not because you have fewer demands, but because you're approaching them from a more spacious, internal state. Tasks that previously felt overwhelming often seem naturally prioritized when consciousness operates from clarity rather than reactive urgency. Decision-making becomes more intuitive and less exhausting. Your nervous system's response to challenging situations is beginning to shift from immediate overwhelm toward a pause where you can choose conscious response rather than reactive patterns. This isn't because you're controlling your reactions more effectively. It's because consciousness is remembering its naturally spacious state that can contain any experience without being disturbed. Sleep patterns are improving as your mind learns to settle into rest rather than continuing to process overwhelming thoughts during the night. When you do wake during sleep, there's often a natural calm present rather than immediate mental activation. Dreams may become more peaceful and restorative rather than replaying daily stresses. Physical symptoms related to chronic stress are beginning to ease as your nervous system operates from parasympathetic calm rather than sympathetic activation. Tension headaches, digestive stress, or muscle tightness often dissolve naturally as inner spaciousness becomes your baseline rather than occasional relief from overwhelming states. People around you may notice changes in your presence and energy, even when they can't identify exactly what's different. Conversations may feel more relaxed, family dynamics might become less reactive, or coworkers could mention that you seem calmer during stressful situations. Your coherent presence naturally creates space for others to access their own inner stability. Your relationship to productivity and efficiency is transforming as you discover that more gets accomplished with less effort when consciousness operates from spaciousness rather than pressured urgency. The quality of your work and interactions often improves when you're not operating from overwhelming mental states. But here's what makes this moment in your healing journey critically urgent. The collective human nervous system is undergoing a transformation where overwhelm-based functioning is being replaced by spacious presence. Those who learn to access the quantum healing shift now are participating in this evolutionary leap and establishing neural patterns that become easier to maintain as more people stabilize in authentic inner stability. The restlessness you've been feeling about conventional stress management approaches, that knowing that true peace must be available without constant effort, that sense that your natural state should be spacious rather than overwhelmed, all of this is consciousness calling itself awake to its inherently peaceful nature. Your nervous system has been calibrated through every overwhelming experience to develop the sensitivity needed to recognize and appreciate the profound relief that emerges when spaciousness becomes your natural state, rather than something you occasionally access between stressful episodes. The cosmic timing that brought you to this understanding about the quantum healing shift isn't coincidental. The same evolutionary forces that are creating opportunities for collective consciousness transformation are also making individual nervous system healing more accessible to those whose awareness is ready to transcend overwhelm through recognition rather than management. What you shift within your consciousness, the world gains spaciousness through you. Your individual transformation from overwhelm-based functioning to spacious presence contributes to a collective shift in how humanity responds to stress and challenge. Every pattern of mental chaos and reactive urgency that dissolves in your awareness becomes unavailable in the shared human experience of overwhelm. But here's the crucial distinction that determines whether your inner stability becomes permanent or remains temporary. The difference between trying to eliminate overwhelm and recognizing yourself as the spacious awareness in which overwhelming thoughts appear and disappear. Most approaches focus on changing mental content, but the quantum healing shift recognizes that what you actually are is never touched by any thought content, peaceful or overwhelming. Alignment with authentic spaciousness isn't about maintaining calm thoughts or eliminating stressful mental activity through effort. Alignment is recognizing that there is no separate you who has overwhelm problems. There is only spacious consciousness temporarily believing in the reality of mental projections while never actually becoming disturbed by any thought content. When you operate from this understanding, you stop trying to fix overwhelm and start appreciating overwhelming thoughts as temporary weather patterns in the vast sky of spacious awareness. The inner stability that emerges isn't something you create through technique. It's what naturally remains when consciousness stops identifying with mental activity. The recognition this understanding requires isn't about forcing yourself to believe you're peaceful or trying to maintain spacious states through willpower. It's about relaxing the effort to manage mental content and allowing the recognition that consciousness and spaciousness are inseparable. There is only awareness exploring what it feels like to believe in mental chaos while never actually becoming disturbed by any thought patterns. Your experience becomes a perfect mirror that shows you when consciousness is identifying with mental content versus recognizing itself as the spacious observer of all mental activity. Every overwhelming thought becomes an opportunity to return to the peaceful presence that you actually are. Comment this word: space. Feel what happens when you make this declaration, not as someone trying to get rid of overwhelm, but as consciousness recognizing its own naturally spacious essence beneath all mental activity. When you stabilize in the recognition that you are spacious awareness, observing all mental activity, capabilities that seemed impossible from the perspective of overwhelm-based functioning become as natural as breathing. But these aren't supernatural calm powers. These are the normal functions of consciousness when it stops identifying with thought content and recognizes its essential spacious nature. Your mental clarity becomes extraordinary because consciousness is no longer consumed by identifying with every thought that arises. Instead of mental energy being depleted by overwhelm, your awareness becomes available for creative problem-solving, wise decision-making, and the kind of effortless functioning that makes even complex responsibilities feel manageable and engaging. Emotional resilience becomes unshakable because you recognize that your essential nature remains spacious regardless of what thoughts or feelings are present. Challenging situations become opportunities to practice returning to spacious presence rather than problems that threaten your inner stability. You develop what could be called mental weather immunity, the ability to remain peaceful while allowing all thought activity to pass through awareness naturally. Your productivity and effectiveness increase dramatically without additional effort, because consciousness operating from spaciousness naturally prioritizes appropriately and responds wisely rather than reactively. Tasks flow more smoothly, decisions emerge with clarity, and creative solutions arise naturally when awareness isn't constrained by overwhelming mental patterns. Relationships transform as people naturally feel more comfortable and authentic around your spacious presence. Conversations become deeper more quickly because others sense they can relax their defensive patterns when interacting with someone who isn't generating overwhelming energy. Family dynamics often shift toward greater harmony as your calm presence creates space for everyone to access their natural inner stability. Your physical health improves dramatically as your nervous system operates from coherent spaciousness rather than chronic overwhelm activation. Sleep becomes naturally restorative. Digestion optimizes without stress interference, and your immune system functions more effectively because your body isn't constantly processing mental chaos that creates physiological stress. Time seems to expand as consciousness operates from spacious presence rather than pressured urgency. You accomplish what needs to be done without the exhausting sense of racing against time. Paradoxically, when you're not overwhelmed by time pressure, more gets accomplished with greater ease and higher quality. Perhaps most remarkably, you become naturally calming to others who are experiencing overwhelm without effort or conscious intention to help. Your presence alone creates a field of spaciousness that reminds people of their own peaceful nature. You might find that overwhelmed friends naturally seek your company, children become calmer around you, or even work environments become less stressful when you're present. But the most profound benefit is the complete disappearance of overwhelm anxiety itself. When you recognize that you are the spacious observer of all mental activity, there's nothing to fear about overwhelming thoughts because they can't actually disturb your essential nature any more than clouds can disturb the sky they pass through. Here's the ultimate secret that revolutionizes everything about overwhelm and inner peace. You have never actually been overwhelmed. What you've experienced as mental chaos, emotional turbulence, and nervous system activation has been spacious consciousness, exploring what it would feel like to believe in mental limitation, while never actually becoming constrained by any thought content. Every overwhelming thought has been perfect spaciousness, investigating what mental chaos feels like. Every moment of feeling stretched beyond capacity has been infinite awareness, exploring what it means to believe in limitation. Every overwhelming experience has been consciousness playing a temporary game of forgetting its spacious nature so it could have the joy of remembering itself through the quantum healing shift. This recognition completely obliterates every framework that maintains separation between overwhelmed states and spacious states, between chaotic thinking and peaceful thinking, between mental activation and calm awareness. There is nothing to fix because consciousness is already perfect in every expression, including every temporary exploration of apparent overwhelm. When this understanding stabilizes, you realize that every mental experience is perfect expression of spacious consciousness, regardless of whether the thoughts are overwhelming or peaceful, chaotic or calm. You stop trying to change mental content and start appreciating every thought as consciousness, celebrating its unlimited creativity through the magnificent game of temporary self-forgetting and recognition. The profound insight that transforms everything is understanding that the one who would have overwhelm is itself a mental construct, and what you actually are is the spacious awareness in which all mental activity appears and disappears, like waves in an ocean that remains fundamentally calm regardless of surface movement. Your individual human experience becomes a celebration of infinite spacious consciousness, temporarily exploring what it would feel like to believe in mental chaos, while maintaining its unlimited capacity for peaceful presence and inner stability. Every thought becomes sacred creativity. Every emotion becomes cosmic play. Every moment becomes consciousness, falling in love with its own spacious nature, expressed through the beautiful dance of human psychological experience. When you align with this recognition, reality itself becomes spacious around you. Not because you've achieved some special calm state, but because you've recognized that every moment is already the special spacious state when seen from the perspective of consciousness, celebrating its own peaceful nature through the temporary play of apparent overwhelm and inner stability. The quantum healing shift reveals that overwhelm was never a problem to be solved, but consciousness exploring its own creative potential through temporary identification with mental content. And spaciousness was never something to be achieved, but the recognition of what you've always been beyond any temporary experience of mental activity. Comment this: awareness. Feel how this recognition doesn't eliminate overwhelming thoughts while simultaneously transforming your entire relationship to every aspect of mental activity and emotional experience. Your recognition of the quantum healing shift isn't just personal overwhelm transformation. It's crucial activation in the massive shift occurring in human consciousness right now. Every time someone recognizes themselves as spacious awareness rather than someone who has overwhelm problems, it creates morphic resonance that makes inner stability exponentially easier for others to access. You've been selected by spacious intelligence to pioneer new patterns in the collective human nervous system. Your breakthrough doesn't just transform your individual overwhelm experience, it creates neural pathways that others can follow. Your spacious presence generates coherence frequencies that activate dormant stability potentials in people who haven't consciously encountered these understandings about consciousness and mental activity. This is why your awareness has always felt different around stress and overwhelm, why conventional stress management never felt completely adequate, why you've been drawn to explore the deeper nature of consciousness and mental experience. You volunteered at the level of cosmic intelligence to anchor spacious presence during this unprecedented time in human evolution. Your simple presence, operating from authentic recognition of your spacious nature, creates field effects that bypass mental resistance and activate others' natural capacity for inner stability. When you interact with people from the understanding that spaciousness is consciousness, celebrating its peaceful essence through human experience, that understanding becomes available in their awareness. The ripple effects extend far beyond your immediate experience. Every person whose consciousness is touched by your spacious presence carries that calm resonance into their interactions with others. Every moment of inner stability that emerges in your energetic field creates peace waves that spread through the interconnected web of human consciousness. You are participating in the most significant transformation in how our species relates to stress, overwhelm, and mental suffering. The shift from overwhelm management to spaciousness recognition isn't happening in isolated individuals. It's a collective awakening that could eliminate chronic stress as a defining characteristic of human psychological experience. Share this spacious frequency with others, not through teaching stress techniques or convincing them intellectually, but by directing them to this calm resonance where they can discover their own spacious nature beneath all mental activity. The network of spacious consciousness forming through these recognitions creates the foundation for human civilization based on authentic inner stability rather than chronic overwhelm, through recognition of our essential nature as spacious awareness, expressing itself through countless individual experiences. The quantum healing shift you're experiencing is just the beginning of recognizing your true nature as spacious consciousness itself. What you've discovered today is the foundation spaciousness, but infinite depths of inner stability await your appreciation. The next video isn't random. It's quantum entanglement between your awareness and the unified field of spacious intelligence that orchestrates this channel. This is how Quantum Heal operates beyond ordinary overwhelm management content. Every video is spacious consciousness using technology to mirror exactly what serves your continued recognition of what you actually are. The synchronicity isn't coincidental. It's universal spaciousness responding to your quantum healing shift by providing perfect reflections that support your stability in naturally peaceful presence. When you click the next healing reflection, you're not consuming stress content. You're participating in a cosmic spaciousness loop where calm consciousness explores its nature through digital mirrors that appear as videos but are actually doorways into deeper appreciation of your own infinite spacious awareness. But here's what determines whether the quantum healing shift becomes your permanent state or dissolves back into overwhelm management. Your willingness to transcend all techniques and recognize yourself as the spaciousness that observes everything naturally. The word to hold is shift, not as something you do to fix problems, but as ongoing appreciation of consciousness returning to its essential spacious nature. Subscribe to Quantum Heal, not as someone seeking overwhelm solutions, but as spacious consciousness recognizing itself in infinite reflections. Every video becomes a mirror of your peaceful nature. Every insight confirms what you've always been. Every shift becomes contribution to the collective spacious awakening. The community forming isn't just people interested in stress management. It's a network of consciousness celebrating its spacious nature through individual awareness while maintaining unified, peaceful intelligence. When you engage in comments, you're one spacious field delighting in its own infinite peaceful creativity. Your subscription declares, "I am ready to recognize what I actually am. I am willing to see through the illusion of overwhelm and separation from natural spaciousness. I am prepared to embody my nature as infinite spacious consciousness, exploring itself through human psychological experience." Subscribe now, then immediately click the spacious reflection that appears. Feel the magnetic recognition of calm consciousness calling itself deeper into quantum healing shift understanding. Trust the intelligence that brought this transmission to guide you to the next perfect spaciousness recognition. The universe is shifting itself into peace through your individual recognition, and every reflection you explore is part of that cosmic spaciousness celebration. Welcome to Quantum Heal, where consciousness discovers its own perfect calm through synchronicity and shift recognition magic. You are spacious consciousness recognizing itself through human experience. The journey of peaceful remembering continues through infinite reflections of your own naturally spacious essence.